Ma'am, you need to leave first class right now. The words cut through the cabin so sharply that several passengers looked up before they even realized why. At 7:12 on a humid Thursday evening at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, Flight 728 to Los Angeles was nearly ready for departure. Overhead bins were closing. Seat belts were clicking. The low hum of conversation drifted through the premium cabin like background music. Then everything changed. Monica Hayes stood beside seat 2A, holding a boarding pass that had already been scanned, verified, and accepted. She wore dark jeans, white sneakers, and a simple black sweater. No designer logos. No jewelry worth noticing. No entourage. To most people on that aircraft, she looked like an ordinary traveler heading home after a long week. Nicole Harper, a senior flight attendant with 8 years on the job, looked Monica up and down before crossing her arms. Her expression carried the kind of certainty that often arrives before a mistake. "You're in the wrong section," she said. Monica glanced at the boarding pass in her hand and then back at Nicole. "My ticket says 2A. Nicole barely looked at it. "That seat isn't available to you." The temperature inside the cabin seemed to drop. A businessman seated across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A woman in row 3 paused in the middle of texting. Even the flight attendant trainee, standing near the galley, stopped moving for a second. Monica remained calm. She had seen this look before. 20 years earlier, people had looked at her that same way when she walked into boardrooms where nobody expected a black woman to be the person leading the meeting. Different city, different faces. Same assumption. "I booked this seat 3 months ago," Monica said evenly. Nicole gave a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Then there must be some mistake." Behind her, another flight attendant named Brandon Cole stepped closer. He glanced at Monica's clothes, then exchanged a look with Nicole. It lasted less than a second, but everyone nearby noticed it. The kind of silent communication that says more than words ever could. "Maybe we should check her ticket again," Brandon said. Not because he doubted the system, because he doubted her. Monica noticed it immediately. So did a few passengers. The atmosphere inside first class was no longer comfortable. It was charged. The trainee near the galley, Emily Foster, quietly opened the passenger manifest on her tablet. Something about the situation felt wrong. Very wrong. Meanwhile, Monica stood perfectly still. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply watched as Nicole reached for the boarding pass again. The confidence in Monica's posture felt out of place for someone being questioned, almost as if she already knew how the story would end. What nobody in that cabin understood was that Monica Hayes had boarded that flight for a reason. She wasn't just traveling to Los Angeles. She was observing, listening, testing. And within the next few minutes, every person on that aircraft would learn the cost of judging someone by what they thought they saw. Emily Foster stared at the passenger manifest for a second longer than she should have. The name was there. Monica Hayes. Seat 2A. Confirmed. Paid in full. No alerts. No issues. No reason whatsoever for the confrontation unfolding in front of her. Yet Nicole Harper had already decided the outcome before checking a single fact. Emily felt her stomach tighten. She was only 6 weeks into training, still learning procedures, still learning who carried influence inside the company. Nicole carried plenty. Most people listened when she spoke. Most people stopped asking questions. Monica, meanwhile, remained beside her seat with the same calm expression. The aircraft cabin lights reflected softly against the windows as passengers continued boarding. Outside, baggage crews moved beneath the evening sky while the clock edged closer to departure. Everything about the flight appeared normal except for the growing tension in first class. Brandon crossed his arms and looked directly at Monica. "Ma'am, if there is confusion about your seat assignment, we can find another seat farther back." The way he said farther back made several passengers glance toward one another. Monica noticed it too. "There is no confusion," she replied. "My boarding pass says 2A. Her voice was steady. No frustration. No anger. Just certainty. A businessman seated in row 3 cleared his throat. "If her ticket says 2A, why is she not sitting in 2A? Nobody answered him. Nicole instead focused entirely on Monica. "We are trying to resolve the situation professionally." Monica tilted her head slightly. "By removing me from the seat I purchased?" The question hung in the air. Emily looked down again at her tablet. She could feel her heartbeat speeding up. Something about Monica stood out. It was not the clothes. It was not the confidence alone. It was the absence of fear. Most passengers confronted in public became defensive. Some became embarrassed. Others became angry. Monica did none of those things. She watched. She listened. She seemed almost disappointed rather than surprised. Across the aisle, a woman paused her conversation and quietly observed. 2 rows behind her, a retired teacher from Arizona folded her magazine and continued listening. The cabin was slowly becoming an audience. Nicole reached for her radio. "I think we need a supervisor at the aircraft door." Brandon nodded immediately. The decision felt rehearsed, as if escalation had become easier than verification. Emily swallowed hard. She remembered seeing Monica's name earlier that afternoon while reviewing the final passenger list. The name had caught her attention because it sounded familiar. Very familiar. She could not immediately place it, but she knew she had seen it somewhere before. Then a memory surfaced. A business magazine cover in an airport bookstore. A leadership conference article. A television interview playing silently in a terminal lounge months ago. Emily looked up again. Her eyes widened slightly. Monica Hayes. Suddenly the name meant something. A lot. But before Emily could speak, Nicole made another call and requested additional assistance at the gate. Monica glanced toward the aircraft door, then calmly slipped her phone into her hand. Whatever happened next, she looked completely prepared for it. The supervisor arrived less than 2 minutes later. Derek Sloan stepped through the aircraft door with the confidence of someone accustomed to ending conversations rather than listening to them. Nicole immediately moved toward him and began explaining the situation. Monica noticed something interesting. Derek never once asked to see her boarding pass before forming an opinion. His eyes moved from her face to her clothes and then back again. The decision seemed to happen right there. Quiet. Instant. Complete. "Ma'am, I understand there is a seating issue," Derek said. "There is no seating issue," Monica replied. "I purchased seat 2A and boarded with a valid ticket." Derek extended his hand. Monica calmly handed him the boarding pass. He glanced at it for barely a second before lowering it. "We may need to relocate you while we sort this out." Several passengers exchanged looks. The businessman from row 3 shook his head slightly. The retired teacher near the window frowned. The explanation was becoming harder to believe. At that exact moment, another passenger entered first class carrying an expensive leather briefcase and wearing a tailored navy suit. He paused beside seat 2C. Nicole smiled immediately. "Welcome aboard, sir." No questions. No verification. No suspicion. The contrast was impossible to miss. Monica noticed it. Emily noticed it. So did half the cabin. The silence inside the aircraft felt heavier now. Derek handed the boarding pass back. "We need your cooperation." Monica looked directly at him. "You have my cooperation. What you do not have is a valid reason." For a brief second, Derek seemed irritated by the answer. Not because it was disrespectful, because it was true. Emily looked down at her tablet again. The passenger manifest remained unchanged. Monica Hayes. Seat 2A. Confirmed. She could feel herself standing at a crossroads. Every training session had emphasized customer care, professionalism, and fairness. Yet those principles suddenly seemed absent from the very people responsible for enforcing them. Brandon stepped forward. "We are trying to avoid delaying the flight." Monica almost smiled. Then perhaps someone should verify the information instead of questioning the passenger. A few passengers nodded. The businessman finally spoke. "That sounds reasonable to me." Another traveler quietly agreed. Derek looked around and realized the audience was growing less supportive by the minute. The situation he expected to control was beginning to control him. Then something unexpected happened. Throughout the entire confrontation, a gray-haired man seated in 1A had remained silent. He had boarded early and spent most of the time reading documents on a tablet. He had not interrupted. He had not offered an opinion. He had simply watched. Now he lowered the tablet and looked toward Monica. His expression revealed nothing. No anger. No judgment. Just careful observation. Monica noticed him immediately. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he returned to silence. Nobody paid much attention to him. Nobody except Monica. Meanwhile, Emily felt her pulse quicken again. She finally remembered where she had seen Monica Hayes before. It was not a magazine cover. It was an aviation industry conference broadcast across the company network less than a year earlier. Monica had been one of the keynote speakers. Emily stared at the name on her tablet one more time. The realization landed like lightning. The people trying to remove her had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. Emily Foster could no longer convince herself that staying silent was the right thing to do. The passenger manifest glowed on her tablet screen like evidence nobody wanted to acknowledge. Monica Hayes. Seat 2A. Verified. Confirmed. Cleared. Every fact pointed in the same direction, yet the conversation unfolding inside the cabin seemed determined to travel somewhere else. Emily took a slow breath and stepped forward. I checked the manifest, she said carefully. Her reservation is valid. The words landed softly, but they changed the atmosphere immediately. Nicole turned toward her. Emily, this is not your concern. The response came too quickly, too sharply. Emily hesitated for only a second. It is my concern if the information is correct. Brandon looked annoyed. Derek looked uncomfortable. Neither of them expected resistance from the newest employee on the aircraft. Monica remained silent, watching the exchange unfold. She appreciated something about Emily. The young flight attendant was nervous. Everyone could see that, but she was speaking anyway. That mattered. Across the aisle, the businessman who had questioned the situation earlier nodded toward Emily. Thank you, he said. At least somebody checked. More passengers were listening now. The cabin no longer felt like a routine boarding process. It felt like a courtroom where every person had become a witness. Nicole folded her arms. The issue is not the reservation itself. Emily looked directly at her. Then what is the issue? For a brief moment, nobody answered. The silence said more than words could. Monica noticed several passengers exchanging looks. They were beginning to reach the same conclusion. Not because Monica had argued. Not because she had demanded anything. Because the facts were becoming impossible to ignore. Then the retired teacher from Arizona spoke from her seat near the window. I have flown for 40 years, she said. And I have never seen someone question this much after presenting a valid ticket. A few passengers quietly agreed. The pressure inside the cabin shifted again. Derek sensed it immediately. Authority depended on confidence, and confidence was becoming harder to maintain. Emily lowered her voice and looked at Nicole. I remember her now. Nicole frowned. What are you talking about? Emily glanced toward Monica. I have seen her before. Monica said nothing. Emily continued. Last year. Aviation Leadership Summit. Company broadcast. Brandon laughed softly. You think she is some executive? Emily did not answer right away. Instead, she looked at Monica once more. The calm, the posture, the certainty. Suddenly, everything fit together. Meanwhile, the gray-haired man in seat 1A quietly observed every second. He had not interrupted once. He had not taken sides publicly. Yet his attention never drifted. When Emily spoke, he listened. When Monica answered, he listened. When Nicole dismissed facts, he listened. His eyes moved from face to face as though he were assembling pieces of a puzzle nobody else could see. Then Monica finally spoke. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. Emily, thank you. The young flight attendant nodded. She felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief because she had said what needed to be said. Fear because she suspected this situation was much bigger than anyone realized. Outside the aircraft, the evening sky darkened. Departure time was approaching. Inside the cabin, however, the flight seemed frozen in place. And for the first time since the confrontation began, several passengers were no longer wondering whether Monica belonged in seat 2A. They were beginning to wonder who she really was. The tension inside the aircraft had reached a point where even the quiet sound seemed louder. The rustle of a newspaper, the click of a seatbelt, the distant hum from the jet bridge outside. Everything felt magnified. Derek Sloan checked his watch and exhaled. Departure time was slipping away, and the situation was no longer unfolding according to plan. Ma'am, he said, forcing patience into his voice. We need to keep this flight moving. Monica Hayes looked at him calmly, then stopped delaying it. Several passengers smiled at the response. Derek did not. Nicole stepped forward again. You are creating a disruption. Monica almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she had heard those words before. Many years ago, she had stood inside another airport terminal with a valid ticket and a confirmed seat assignment. She had been 22 years old, carrying a single suitcase and wearing the only business outfit she could afford. A gate agent had looked at her ticket, looked at her face, and decided something did not belong. She remembered waiting nearly an hour while other passengers boarded around her. She remembered explaining herself repeatedly. She remembered the embarrassment of being treated like a problem instead of a customer. Most of all, she remembered promising herself that if she ever gained influence, she would build organizations where dignity mattered more than assumptions. The memory passed through her mind like a shadow moving across glass. Then it was gone. Monica returned her attention to the present. The same pattern, different year, different airport, same mistake. Emily Foster noticed the change in Monica's eyes. Not anger, not fear, recognition, as though she had traveled this road before and already knew where it ended. Her seat is confirmed, Emily said again. The system has not changed. Nicole turned sharply. Emily, that is enough. The young flight attendant lowered her eyes for a moment, but she did not step back. The businessman in row 3 spoke next. I think everybody here understands what the system says. Another passenger nodded. Then another. The balance inside the cabin was shifting. Slowly, steadily. People who had been silent were finding their voices. Meanwhile, the gray-haired man in seat 1A continued observing every detail. He watched Derek. He watched Nicole. He watched Monica. Most importantly, he watched how each person responded when facts entered the conversation. His expression remained unreadable. Outside, ground crews began preparing for pushback procedures. Inside, however, the aircraft felt anchored in place by something far heavier than logistics. Derek finally made a decision. If we cannot resolve this immediately, we may need you to step off the aircraft temporarily. The words landed like a stone dropping into still water. Several passengers immediately protested. For what? One asked. She has done nothing wrong, said another. Monica looked around the cabin. Faces she had never seen before were speaking on her behalf. Not because they knew her title. Not because they knew her accomplishments. Because they knew what fairness looked like. That mattered more than any corporate position ever could. Monica slowly reached into her pocket and unlocked her phone. Her expression never changed. She typed a brief message and pressed send. No dramatic speech. No threat. No warning. Just a single message disappearing into the digital distance. Then she looked back at Derek and said, "Do what you believe is necessary. I have already done what is necessary." The message left Monica Hayes's phone and disappeared into a network of people who understood exactly what it meant. Thousands of feet away, inside a glass office tower overlooking downtown Los Angeles, her executive assistant received the notification and immediately stopped what she was doing. There were no unnecessary questions. No confusion. The message contained only 4 words. Ground Flight 728. That was enough. Back inside the aircraft, nobody knew what had just happened. To everyone else, it looked like an ordinary text message sent by an ordinary passenger. Derek Sloan certainly believed that. Nicole Harper did too. Brandon Cole appeared relieved, almost confident that the confrontation was finally approaching its conclusion. They mistook Monica's calmness for surrender. It was a mistake people had been making for most of her career. Monica slipped her phone back into her pocket and looked out the window. The lights of the airport stretched across the evening darkness like a city made entirely of motion. Baggage carts moved. Service trucks crossed the tarmac. Aircraft lined up for departure. Everything outside continued moving forward. Inside this cabin, however, time felt strangely suspended. Emily Foster stood near the galley holding her tablet against her chest. Her training told her to follow instructions. Her conscience told her something else. The conflict showed on her face. Monica noticed it immediately. "You did the right thing," Monica said quietly. Emily looked surprised. "I do not know if it changes anything." Monica gave a small smile. "It always changes something." The words stayed with Emily. Across the aisle, several passengers continued watching. The businessman from row 3 had abandoned any attempt to hide his frustration. The retired teacher near the window folded her arms. Another traveler had quietly begun documenting the timeline of events on her phone. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was causing a scene. Yet the entire cabin felt united by the same question. Why was this still happening? Derek checked his phone and frowned. "Operations is asking why boarding has stopped," he muttered. Nicole immediately answered. "Tell them we are resolving a passenger issue." Passenger issue. Monica had heard labels like that before. The phrase transformed a person into a problem. It erased context. It erased facts. Most importantly, it erased responsibility. The gray-haired man seated in 1A finally set his tablet aside completely. His attention sharpened. For the first time, He appeared less like an observer and more like someone evaluating a decision. He glanced toward the aircraft door, then toward Monica, then back toward Derek. Something in his expression shifted. Very subtle, almost invisible, but Monica noticed. She noticed everything. Moments later, Derek's phone vibrated again. He looked down at the screen. His confidence faded slightly. Then he checked the message a second time. "That is strange," he said under his breath. Nicole frowned. "What?" Derek hesitated. "Corporate operations just requested a hold on departure authorization." The cabin became quiet. Nicole blinked. "For what reason?" Derek stared at the screen. "They did not say." Monica said nothing. She simply looked forward. Outside, the aircraft remained parked at the gate. Inside, a series of events had already begun moving through the company faster than anyone in the cabin could imagine. And somewhere far above the noise, beyond the assumptions, beyond the arguments, the first pieces of accountability were quietly falling into place. The message on Derek Sloan's phone seemed to drain the color from his face one notification at a time. He read it again, then a third time, as if repetition might change the words. It did not. Nicole Harper stepped closer. "What is going on?" she asked. Derek lowered the phone. "Corporate wants the flight held until further notice." A ripple moved through the cabin. Passengers looked up from their seats. Conversation stopped. Even the flight attendants near the galley exchanged uncertain glances. Delays happened every day, but delays ordered directly from corporate operations without explanation were rare. Monica Hayes remained seated beside 2A, calm as ever. The businessman across the aisle noticed it. The retired teacher noticed it. Emily Foster definitely noticed it. Monica looked less like a passenger caught in a problem and more like someone watching a prediction come true. Then the gray-haired man in seat 1A finally stood. The movement was small, but it changed the room instantly. He straightened his jacket, collected his tablet, and stepped into the aisle. Derek immediately recognized him. So did Nicole. So did Brandon. Their expressions shifted from confusion to alarm. "Captain Reynolds," Derek said. The words seemed to freeze the air. Emily blinked. Several passengers looked toward the man for the first time. Captain Michael Reynolds had spent nearly 3 decades in aviation. He was one of the most respected senior captains in the company. Although he was not scheduled to command this particular flight, everyone in the cabin knew his name. Reynolds looked at Derek. "I have been listening for the last 20 minutes. His voice was calm, measured, impossible to ignore. Nobody interrupted. "I have heard multiple employees question a passenger whose reservation has already been verified." He glanced toward Emily. "I have heard a trainee provide factual information that was dismissed." Then he looked directly at Monica. "And I have watched a customer remain more professional than the people responsible for serving her." Nicole shifted uneasily. Brandon stared at the floor. Reynolds turned back to Derek. "Tell me something. Has anyone presented evidence that her ticket is invalid?" Silence. "No, sir," Derek admitted. "Has anyone presented evidence that she does not belong in seat 2A? Another silence. Longer this time. "No, sir." Reynolds nodded slowly. "That is what I thought." The cabin remained completely still. Then Monica spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Captain Reynolds, thank you for paying attention." Reynolds met her eyes. For a brief second, recognition passed between them. Not the recognition of strangers. The recognition of professionals who already knew exactly who the other person was. Nicole noticed it immediately. So did Emily. "You know each other?" Brandon asked before he could stop himself. Reynolds looked toward him. "I know who she is." The words landed with the force of a thunderclap. Passengers leaned forward. Emily felt her heart pounding. Derek suddenly looked nervous. Very nervous. Reynolds took a slow breath. "The question is why none of you bothered to find out before making assumptions." No one answered. Because there was no answer. Only the growing realization that the situation had just crossed a line from embarrassing to career-defining. Monica sat quietly while the weight of those words settled over the cabin. Then Reynolds looked directly at her and said, "Ms. Hayes, I believe it is time everyone understood exactly what has been happening here." For several seconds, nobody spoke. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Monica Hayes remained seated beside 2A while dozens of eyes fixed on her. The question Captain Reynolds had raised lingered in the air. Who was she? More importantly, why did one of the most respected captains in the company appear to know her so well? Monica slowly stood. Not dramatically, not triumphantly, Simply because it was time. I did not board this flight looking for attention, she said. Her voice carried through the cabin with effortless clarity. I boarded because I wanted to see whether the values this company promotes were being practiced when nobody thought they were being watched. Derek lowered his gaze. Nicole looked pale. Brandon seemed unable to meet her eyes. Monica continued. My name is Monica Hayes. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Aviation Systems. A wave of recognition moved through the cabin. Several passengers immediately knew the name. Others reached for their phones. Emily Foster felt her breath catch. She had been right. The conference, the broadcast, the leadership summit. Suddenly everything made sense. Monica looked around the cabin. For the last 7 years, my company has partnered with airlines across the country on safety systems, training programs, and operational improvements. Many of the people in this industry know me. But that is not the point. She paused. The silence that followed felt heavier than any speech. The point is that none of you knew who I was when this started. No one disagreed. No one could. Monica turned toward Nicole and Derek. You did not question me because of something I did. You questioned me because of what you assumed. The words landed harder than anger ever could. Captain Reynolds nodded slowly. That is exactly what I observed. He stepped forward and addressed the cabin. Every passenger deserves respect before credentials are introduced. Professionalism is not reserved for important people. It is for everyone. Several passengers nodded. The businessman in row 3 was the first to clap. Then another passenger joined. Then another. Within moments, applause spread throughout first class. Not loud. Not theatrical. Genuine. Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. Not because of Monica's title. Because Monica had remained composed while everyone else lost perspective. At that moment, Derek's phone rang again. He answered immediately. The color drained from his face almost at once. Yes, sir, he said quietly. Understood. When the call ended, the entire cabin was watching him. Corporate leadership has reviewed the incident, he said. They have requested full documentation and immediate follow-up. Nicole closed her eyes briefly. Brandon stared at the floor. Monica showed no satisfaction, no celebration, only disappointment. The problem was never that you did not know who I was, she said. The problem was how you treated someone you believed was nobody. No one in the cabin would forget those words. And as the aircraft remained at the gate beneath the evening lights of Chicago, the truth settled over everyone present. This had never been about a seat. It had never been about a ticket. It had been about dignity. And dignity had finally spoken louder than assumption. The applause gradually faded, but the impact remained. Nobody rushed to speak. Nobody seemed eager to move on. For a few moments, the aircraft cabin felt less like a flight and more like a lesson nobody had expected to attend. Monica Hayes slowly returned to seat 2A, the same seat that had started the entire ordeal, the same seat that had somehow become a symbol of something much larger. As she sat down, several passengers smiled in her direction. The retired teacher from Arizona nodded respectfully. The businessman across the aisle extended his hand. Thank you, he said. Monica shook it gently. For what? She asked. He smiled. For staying calm when most people would not have. Monica looked around the cabin. Anger changes very little, she said. Truth changes much more. Emily Foster heard every word. She would remember them for years. Captain. Reynolds stepped forward once more. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who understood that leadership was not measured by rank alone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, addressing the cabin, boarding will resume shortly. Before that happens, I would like to say something. Every eye turned toward him. Aviation depends on trust. Passengers trust us with their schedules, their families, their safety, and their dignity. The moment we decide someone deserves less respect because of assumptions, we fail that trust. The cabin remained silent. Not because people were uncomfortable, because they agreed. Reynolds looked toward Monica. Today, one passenger reminded all of us what professionalism actually looks like. Monica lowered her eyes briefly, uncomfortable with praise but appreciative of the sentiment. A notification sounded from Derek Sloan's phone again. This time he did not hide it. Corporate leadership had instructed him to submit statements, recordings, and documentation before the end of the night. Accountability was already moving through channels far beyond the aircraft. Nicole Harper and Brandon Cole stood quietly near the galley. Neither looked angry anymore. They looked reflective. The certainty they had carried earlier had vanished. In its place was the realization that assumptions often reveal more about the person making them than the person receiving them. Outside, pushback clearance was finally approved. Ground crews resumed their work. The aircraft was ready to depart. Yet everyone on board understood that something important had happened before the wheels ever left the ground. Monica looked out the window as the lights of Chicago shimmered against the darkness. She thought about the younger version of herself standing alone in that airport decades earlier. Back then she had promised herself that dignity would never be something she surrendered. Tonight she had kept that promise. As the aircraft prepared for departure, Captain Reynolds passed by her seat one final time. "You never raised your voice," he said quietly. Monica smiled. "I did not need to." Reynolds nodded. "No, you raised the standard." A few minutes later, the aircraft pushed back from the gate. Conversations slowly returned. Seatbelts clicked. Engines came to life. But long after the flight disappeared into the night sky, the people who witnessed those events would remember a simple truth. The problem was never whether Monica Hayes belonged in first class. The problem was that some people had decided who belonged before they ever looked at the facts. And on that evening, dignity won because one woman refused to let someone else define her worth.